Welcome to TNI's Worldview. India's relation with Canada is deep. More than 19 lakh people of Indian origin live in the North American country. Lakhs of Indian students go to Canada every year to study. Understandably, Canadian politicians have always used the Indian card down the years, especially the Sikh card, given that they are the largest population group in the country among the Indians. But Justin Trudeau, the populist PM who bid adieu just a few days ago formally, tried to weaponize it in an unprecedented way. His bid failed, and Mark Carney, a former central banker, has been chosen leader of his party, who will be in the top seat till the elections later in the year. What does that mean for India-Canada relations? Here to talk about it with us is our diplomatic editor Jayanth. I am opinion editor Amitava Sanyal. So Jayanth, what does this mean, a reset? Does this herald or presage a reset between India-Canada?
It's a possibility of a reset. It's actually not a reset yet because there are political issues that have derailed the relationship. So to set it right, so Canada will have to give some concession to India and address India's concern on security front, especially issues like Khalistanis and things like that. So unless that happens, it can't be a reset in political terms. Because when you have a lot of population, when you have Indian origin population there, especially Sikh population, and you have a troubled past as far as the pro-Khalistani movement is concerned, so political relationship holds a very important role. Of course, Canada is a G20 country. You are also a G20 member. A robust trade relationship, economic relationship, investment relationship, students going, all that is fine. But unless you get the political relationship right, it will be very difficult for a complete reset. Considering you had a very bad patch under Trudeau, especially since October 2023, all the messages that is coming out from the new Prime Minister gives the possibility of a real reset. That can happen, provided his party gets re-elected. Even if Conservatives comes back to power, not the Labour Party, I think this is one relationship they will be looking forward to have a reset with. So a real possibility is there, but the proof of the pudding lies in eating. So let's see what happens after that.
Canada's biggest problem right now is not with India, though, is it? It's with Donald Trump. Trump has threatened to levy tariff, though he has held it off for a bit. And people are saying that it helps that a central banker who understands trade possibly in a deeper way is in the hot seat right now. But interestingly, what has happened as a result of Trump tariffs are the usually genial Canadians are up in arms, and it has changed the political equation within the country. Trudeau's party, which was languishing in the polls, opinion polls before the elections, are suddenly now seen rising. So there is a chance that Mark Carney would be back. What does it mean for Canada as a whole, the Trump tariffs?
And that's very true. Even if you look at Trudeau's ratings, in last 2 years it was plummeting. Since Trump came to power and Trudeau seemed to have stood up to Trump on this tariff issue, his popularity rate again went up. So Trump played a major role in the revival of Labour Party. So this party was driven with a lot of internal dissensions, a lot of problems. The top leadership were almost at loggerheads with each other. So all that issues got addressed to an extent thanks to Trump and the tariff war. And unlike many other countries, Canada was one of the countries which said that we will retaliate and we will remove. And also it's a very complex relationship. For example, it's not very easy for the Americans to survive without Canada. For example, a lot of their shrimps, for example, some of them go to Canada for peeling, come back to the US. So it's a very closely knit economic relationship.
And also a supply chain which is closely knit.
Yeah, that is number one. Second, Trump also threatened Canada can be the 51st state. So that is also a political kind of a provocation. So all this will add up to some level of Labour Party gaining ground. Because now, of late, if you look at the popularity charts or you look at what is happening with the Labour Party, so they are making some sort of a comeback. And also they have a leader now who seems to be somebody who can take them through the troubled economic relationship. He is a former banker, he is a person with deep economic understanding. So that is also possible. So Labour Party's fortune has revived thanks to Trump trade and tariff war. So,
The Indian government told Parliament recently that there has been a fall in Indian students going abroad, but the biggest fall, 41% fall in 2024 over 2023, was in students going to Canada, which was the largest destination before that. Now, there was a change in the visa regime during the Trudeau government. What has that meant for students going abroad, and what can students look forward to now?
so Canada has been an easy destination for Indian students for some time. So then what happened after this 2023 September, there was a huge diplomatic spat between India and Canada, which resulted in expulsion of diplomats and a lot of political acrimony between the two sides. As a result, the visa regime got tightened. If you look at the number of diplomats expelled from both countries expelled a lot of diplomats in the tit-for-tat measure. So when you have less diplomats, visa issuing get affected. So that happened. Second, when your political relationships are really on a bad note, so issuing visa becomes another problem. Because people-to-people interaction, students going, all get affected. So that happened between India and Canada. And also there is another trend. If you look at the same data that you have said, there is also a general trend of students going abroad coming down. So which was up after the COVID.
Right.
Even if you look at the US US as a destination, the number of students going, that is also coming down. But in Canada's case, it was due to the very acrimonious political relationship, the visa regime got troubled. Because first they stopped visa for some days, then started issuing visa, then were a lot of restrictions, category-wise relaxation of visa rules. So all that contributed to the visa regime getting very tough. And also when you have a lot of political uncertainty between these two countries, so students also think twice before going to a country which has a politically not in a good terms with your country.
Right.
If you look at Russia is at war or in a conflict as we call it with Ukraine. Despite it being a case, though the base is low, I agree, but if you look at the percentage wise, students going to Russia has gone up.
Right.
So that is because of the political reason. Like the students think even if something happens in Russia-Ukraine conflict, your evacuation will be better. You have a good relation with Russia. So it is better to go to a country even if there is a troubled political relationship with some other country. As long as that troubled relationship is not with your country, that gives a confidence booster. Students go. So a lot of things affect the flow of students. I think the political relationship going bad and the visa regime getting very tighter affected the number of Indian students going to Canada. That's why this dip of 31% last year to end.
Right. Now, the core reason for that deterioration in the political relationship, the Khalistani separatism, which they have nurtured over time, which they brought up, even as late as this January. The Canadian government said that our inquiry, that is their inquiry, hasn't fully acquitted the Indian side of Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing. What does that mean right now? What India asking of Canada, is it very clear?
It's very clear. For example, if you look at history of India-Canada relationship, this Khalistani movement and the support, this has been a long-standing issue. Even previous governments also were like this. If you look at one of the worst terrorist attack on Canada, the air India bomb in Kanishka, even after that, they were not willing to condemn the incident in a very unequivocal manner.
Right.
And even to express their regret to the people. Most of the people, though they were Indian origin, they were Canadian citizens.
Right.
That was again went through a change in 2010. Stephen Harper, then Prime Minister, apologized.
Right.
So there was a brief, good spell in relationship between India and Canada, which was actually built on. If you look at Prime Minister Modi's term, in 2015 he went to Canada. So 1 year after taking charge, and he had a good visit. He even had a diaspora meeting, 3-day visit. So then Trudeau came in 2018, even at the COVID time. So I think at least 3 times these two prime ministers spoke to each other, discussing issues, trade, everything. But after that, the relationship plummeted. There are a couple of things. One, I think more than the Sikh population. If you look at the objective number, Sikh population is only 2%. But the number doesn't tell you the real story because they are very influential people. For example, in Canada, organizing committees and conventions and all that for parties. So Sikh population is very good at that. They control a lot of these things. So getting a crowd to a meeting, it's not like in India that it's very difficult in any Western democracies to get people to a huge rally or a convention. So the Canadians use the Sikh population, their committees or their fellowship and things like that. They used it substantially. So they were a very influential segment of people. in the Indian diaspora, though they constituted very less percentage. If you look at the large population, larger demographic composition of Canada. Second, what happened? Trudeau, more than poor Khalistan, he was seen as a liberal leader, a poster boy, modern liberalism and all that. So if you look at the data before that, so there are many data which suggest more Sikhs voted for Conservative Party than Trudeau's party.
Correct.
So one way to look at it is he was trying to get some votes back.
Win them over.
And second, to reinforce his image as a liberal leader, like he had 4 Sikh ministers in his cabinet.
Yeah.
So all that he has done. But I think it was a mix-up of his liberal image which is going wrong, plus the Khalistan issue got it completely wrong. Even if there was something, the way it was handled also was very bad. It's very unusual between two fellow democracies to see that without sharing an evidence of a crime allegedly committed on your soil through legal channels. Don't forget that these two countries, India and Canada, have a joint working group on terrorism, which is running since 1997, which got upgraded subsequently. Not using any of these diplomatic channels, Trudeau chose to go to the media and to make a statement in the parliament, alleging another country's interference.
Leaking to the press.
Leaking to the press. Then there was a press conference. He went into the floor of the parliament and said this. His foreign minister reiterated the same charges without sharing any evidence. But he thought since Canada is part of Five Eyes Alliance, he is supported by countries like the Americans, so he will hold his foot on. But that didn't happen. It actually backfired on him. Along with that, a lot of things happened in Canada which made his position very untenable because there was inflation, prices of flats, economy was not doing well. So all that added to. If you look at his last stages of his he being in power, so he also reduced the number of quota allotted for foreign immigrants to come into Canada. So he was in a mess, and this pro-Khalistan issue added to it. But make no mistake, the problem with Canadian politics is that you can't expect them to completely stop their support. They may not say it in public to the pro-Khalistani elements because they will cite issues like democracy, Western democracy, quote unquote, to say all this.
They'll use it as a leverage.
They will use it as a leverage because that is how these societies work. Because if you look at the extradition treaties between, or mutual legal assistance treaty which is operating between a Western democracy and India, for example, how many people come here? So only after you negotiate a treaty, you find common elements between your legal framework, you get into an agreement. Despite that, India getting people wanted in crimes in India from these democracies are very less because they treat your democracy differently. So now that has been changing because those days people took Western democracy as the gold standard. Now that is not happening. So it's a very complex political system, political milieu, because everybody is nationalist, everybody is looking at things differently. So unless you get your political relationship right, for that I think Canada has to take some steps on this pro-Khalistani element, how they will handle it. And because if you look at the Nijat killing incident also, so suddenly you see a person who is wanted in Indian law, so there is a silence in Canadian Parliament. So that sends a very wrong message to a bilateral relationship.
Right.
So unless you get your political ties correct, I think it will be very difficult to repair the ties.
Talking about agreements, Indian-Canadian bilateral trade has actually stagnated. It has not grown as it was envisaged after Stephen Harper made the relationship warmer. It's pushing $8 billion US, I suppose now. And
goods.
Yeah, goods, service, in merchandise trade, yes. But there is also a comprehensive economic partnership agreement on the table. Any hope of that getting anywhere?
It's a very robust economic partnership. We take the politics out of it. So trade was not doing bad from 2010 to 2022-23. 22 figures, if you look at it. So it was not faring badly. Then the political issue happened. And also if you look at the investment, this Canadian pension fund invested some 750 billion Canadian dollars in India. It's a huge money. 600 Canadian companies have presence in India. Around 1,000 Canadian companies have market role in India, like they sell their wares some way or the other in India. So it's a huge relationship in that way. Canadian pension fund, one of the strong investors in India.
Huge ones.
Huge one. So it's not a bad relationship. You look at the investment, the trade and things around that. The problem again happens when something goes wrong on political terms, then the reaction will be strong. People who are putting in money will be cautious. But I think trade relationship, once you get your political relationship right, there is enough scope that the trade and investment and other relationship can be back on track. And also a lot of people in India, they find Canada is a very good destination to go and settle there. That is also happening. So people to people contact is not bad. So despite all this politics, I think people to people contacts between these two countries have remained robust, and Canadian universities have been attracting a lot of Indian students like we discussed earlier. So trade investment can improve. Again, the starting point will be how to have a reset in your political relationship.
So the people-to-people contact, which Jan talked about, has led to a new OTT series called Kannada, as Punjabis pronounce the country. It's about a Punjabi singer making it in 1990s Toronto, the land of aspirations for immigrants, as it was at that time. Will it go back to that time? Well, given the geopolitical situation, it's unlikely anytime soon, but we will know better when the Canadian elections happen later this year. It's supposed to happen by September 2025. We'll wait for that moment. This was TNI's Worldview. Thanks for watching.